So I finally got round to making a Sonic Youth video, and I'm not quite sure why it's taken me this long. They're one of my favourite bands. I know I've mentioned them in passing in various videos. I might have looked at one or two little snippets from their songs before, but there's never been a full-on detailed tutorial. And why is that? Maybe I've just been a little bit scared or intimidated, because from a guitar perspective, Sonic Youth stuff is really difficult to figure out. You've got the weird tunings and that kind of unique approach that both the guitar players have to the instrument. And I was thinking about which song I was going to look at. I thought perhaps something off Daydream Nation, which is a classic record. That was the first Sonic Youth album that I heard and really got into, or maybe some earlier stuff, or perhaps something kind of moody and experimental, something off NYC Ghosts and Flowers, which is another album that I really love. But in the end I went for this song, which is Incinerate from the 2006 album Rather Ripped, just because it's not only a great song, but it's also quite accessible in guitar terms once you've got past the slightly strange tuning. Got some great riffs, and I've had a lot of fun figuring this one out and learning how to play it. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. If this goes well, then maybe I'll look at some more Sonic Youth in the future, maybe some more out there experimental stuff where they're playing guitars with screwdrivers and drumsticks and all of that malarkey. But let's get started. I'm going to break down this song. I'm going to look in detail at most of the guitar stuff that you can hear on this one. Now, the most immediate challenge you've got with playing Sonic Youth stuff is figuring out what the hell they're doing with their guitar tunings. This is a band very famous for its weird and wonderful tunings, and this song is no different. And here I have to acknowledge the amazing online resource at sonicyouth.com, where there's actually a database of, I think, every single tuning used on every song, every album, and it's kind of listed according to the Thurston Moore tuning and then the Lee Ronaldo tuning, and as far as I know it's all very accurate information. So that was actually my starting point, just getting into the tuning suggested on that list, and that's a massive time saver. If that didn't exist, then there'd be a lot of trial and error, experimentation, careful listening, maybe trying to find some live videos to figure out what was going on. But I'm really grateful for whoever it was put this database together, that it kind of makes life a lot easier for Sonic Youth fans who are guitar players to figure out what's happening in these songs. Now, according to this list, the tuning that Thurston Moore is using in this song, which I do agree with, from low to high, we've got a D, then we've got a D sharp, then A sharp, then another D sharp, and then on the top we've got G and another G. So all of those notes are tuned down from standard tuning, in some cases by quite a long way. And I've not actually changed any string gauges on my guitar for this video. That's perhaps something that I would do if I were using these tunings a little bit more. I'm sure that's what Sonic Youth would have done, is use slightly heavier strings, and then it means the strings aren't flapping around quite so much and the intonation's probably a little bit more stable. But I say you can make it work with standard gauge strings. I've just got Ernie Ball 10s on this guitar and it seems to work okay. It might kind of drift a little bit out of tune in places, but you can make it work. What's going on with this tuning then? On the surface it is a pretty weird one, but in fact there is a logic to it, and that's the point of these alternate tunings, is that they offer musical and expressive possibilities. And I think with this one, if you ignore the 6th string, then you've actually got quite a nice major chord, a kind of open chord tuning. It's if you think about it, it's kind of an E flat chord. If you relabel the D sharps E flats, and you've got E flat, B flat, E flat, G and G. In terms of the intervals, it's just a root, 5th, a root, and then the major third of an E flat major chord. So not actually that weird. You can do one finger power chords on the 3rd, 4th and 5th strings, and then you've got major chords if you bar all the way across from the 5th string, and then you've got these nice kind of unison drone strings on the top, which are used quite a lot throughout this song. I suppose the weirdest thing about this tuning is the low D on the bottom, and then you've got kind of got this minor second interval between the lowest 2 strings. But as far as I know, in this particular song, the low E string isn't used at all, so you can kind of ignore that for the purposes of this song. And in fact, the Lee Ranaldo tuning, the 6th string is tuned to a D sharp or an E flat as well, so both the lowest 2 strings are in unison, and that might be a sensible thing to do for this song. And then if you accidentally do catch the 6th string, then it's going to sound in the key of the song. Let's make a start breaking down and learning this song then. And for this video I'm going to be focusing mainly on the Thurston Moore guitar part. I think this is a Thurston song, so his guitar part is kind of the backbone of the track, and the interplay between the two Sonic Youth guitarists is always very interesting. So you've got Thurston Moore, Lee Ranaldo. On this record, I think Thurston Moore is panned hard right and Lee Ranaldo is panned hard left. For the most part in this song, Lee Ranaldo is doubling Thurston Moore's parts, but not strictly doubling them. There's some variations. He's often using the same chord shapes but slightly different strumming or different picking, so it's kind of interesting when you're listening, particularly on headphones. You can kind of hear the differences between the two parts. And there are other instances where Ranaldo departs from what Thurston is doing, so I'll try and point out those bits as well where he's adding in some different melodies and fills. So I seem to be talking rather a lot here already, but I hope you find all of this nerding out over Sonic Youth and their tuning's reasonably interesting. But let's get on to the actual learning of the song, shall we? The song kicks off with some big strummed chords. So all open strings. If you have got that 6th string tuned to a D, you might just want to mute that with your thumb so you're not hearing that note, but otherwise you can just strum all the open strings. And I'm giving it just a down, up, down of the pick. It's done quite quickly, so make sure you're staying loose in your strumming hand. And then we've got this little arpeggiated part, which is quite simple. I'm just picking the 5th string, 4th string, 3rd string, and then back again. And then we're into the opening riff, the main riff of the tune, I suppose, the one that goes like this. And basically basically this is just a melody which I'm playing on the second string. So just 12th fret, 10th fret, and then going up to the 15th fret and then back again. And I'm actually detecting an open droning string in there as well, so I'm just letting the top string drone away. And I suppose there are two ways you could do it. You could, because these two strings are tuned to the same note, you could actually do that the opposite way and play the melody on the top string and let the second string drone. But it feels better, and it sounds slightly better to me to have the melody played on the second string. We just repeat that. Let me come lower. So it's just 5, 7, 8 and 7. And at the start of each phrase and in the middle you're actually just striking some of the lower strings as well. So I'd say strings 3, 4 and 5. We repeat that. And on the repeat we're actually going higher, so 5, 7, 8 and then 10. So that's the Thurston Moore part. Lee Ronaldo is playing almost exactly the same thing but playing it slightly differently. So he's playing that melody, but I think he's playing it by barring across the top two strings, and then you get this nice unison effect. So remember, both the top two strings are tuned to the same note, so you're basically doubling yourself here. And you can hear that slight chorusing effect. You often get this with these strings that are tuned to the same note. It's kind of hard to get them exactly in tune, particularly with the vagaries of guitar intonation, which I quite like. So you can hear that they're not quite in tune, it's chorusing slightly, and for me that's always been quite a big part of the Sonic Youth sound, is this slight kind of chorusing modulation sound, either coming from these kind of droning unison strings or when you've got the two guitar players playing slightly out of tune together. But this is what Ronaldo is doing. So subtly different from the Thurston part. You can hear in the Thurston part there's definitely that open droning note in there, and the two parts work really well together. Next we've got the first verse, which is actually quite straightforward once you've figured out the chord shapes. So it's these chords. So starting off with this shape here, I'm just going to shout out the string numbers and the fret numbers. So we've got open 5th string, then 5 on the 4th string, open 3rd string, 5 on the 2nd string, and open 1st string. And then we're going to this. So it's open, open, 7, 7, and open. And then this. So 9, 9, and then the rest of the strings are open, and then we're going back to the previous chords. I'm not exactly sure what these chords are called. We're just kind of going by sound here because everything's been defamiliarized with this strange tune. I quite like that. That's kind of part of the fun of these alternate tunings, is you're just going by these kind of new and interesting sounds. So just cycling through those chords, it's kind of fairly loose and strummy. I think Thurston on this chord is picking it out a little bit more. And Ronaldo, I think, is using the same chord shapes in the first verse. I mean, interestingly, later on in the song, the second verse and in the final verse, he's got a part that's more based on triad shapes. So kind of idea. So with this tuning, the relationship of the second, third and fourth strings is the same as standard tuning, so you can use all these familiar major and minor triad shapes. So that's what he's doing here. We've got a major triad, same shape, up 2 frets, then a minor triad. Next we've got the chorus or the refrain, whatever you want to call it. So here we're just doubling the vocal melody essentially. So we've got this chord shape again that we had in the verse, so 9, 9 and open, and you can just arpeggiate the lowest notes in that shape. And then we've got the melody, so playing this mainly on the 3rd string. I'm just shifting up to the 11th fret here. You could play the same note here, but if you play it on the 3rd string, you can just let the 2nd string come through a little bit as well as a kind of drone. So that's the basic part. That's the Thurston Moore part. Ronaldo is doing almost exactly the same thing, but I think it's slightly simpler. So essentially it's a straight double of the Thurston Moore part. Then we've got the next bit of the song. Is it a bridge? Is it a continuation of the chorus? I'm not exactly sure. It's just going back and forth between 2 power chords really. So we've got a power chord here at the 5th fret, just barring strings 3, 4 and 5, then taking that up 2 frets, just strumming that quite loosely. Then a little single note fill, so I'm just playing this all on the 4th string. Repeated 4 times, and meanwhile over in the other speaker, Lee Ronaldo is playing more or less the same thing, so these same chords, but his fills are slightly different. So sometimes he's doing this like a harmony to the Thurston Moore part, so starting on the 2nd string. And then in subsequent bridge sections, he's doing some slightly different stuff. I think the second time we hear this section, he kind of goes off into more of a lead part. So he kind of steps on a distortion and... So, not playing that part exactly. You can really just improvise some kind of loose melodies. It works well going up and down the length of the 2nd string, I think. Let's move on to the solo then. I love this solo. It's kind of a double solo because both guitar players are soloing at the same time, doing some slightly different things, but we'll take the right hand speaker parts first. We're starting off with just some open string power chords. Then we've got this melody. Playing all of this in the 5th position. You kind of got multiple options where you play some of these notes, but it falls quite nicely here. So 5th fret, 7th fret, 5, 7, and then back. And then the 8th fret here. Then we've got this great part, which is kind of got this repeated open 2nd string, and then 3 and 5. Going up to 5 and 7. So I really like this part. I'm playing this on the second string mainly, but of course because the top string is tuned to the same note, you can kind of play both of those strings together if you want to as well, or just sometimes let that top string come through. It's just the 8th fret, 10th fret, and a similar idea, a bit higher up the neck. I think it's 12 and 15 actually, so and up to 15 and 17, and then we're finishing kind of way up here at the 20th fret, and then just doing some crazy bending right at the high end of the neck, so 20th fret again, I think. So that's the Thurston solo. I mean, with a bit of distortion, it would sound like this. And then what Lee is doing over in the other speaker, it starts off with a bit of a harmony part. So that idea. So I'm playing this up in the 12th position. You can let some of the other strings drone away as well. This building chord part. I love the way this section of the song builds. It's quite television like, I think, this bit of the tune, a little bit kind of Marky Moon in there. So we're starting off with kind of playing these double stops, these unison notes on the top pair of strings, but we've got some droning open strings too. So it starts off at the 3rd fret, in 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, and then 20th fret, and that 20th fret bend. So end of the solo going into unison with Thurston Moore. So that's about it for this one. I hope I've covered most of the pertinent guitar parts in this tune. I've not tried to be totally exhaustive and go into every last nuance of the tune, but I hope I've looked at all of the most interesting parts, and I think I've gone into sufficient nerdy detail in this one anyway. Let me talk about the gear that I'm using today, and again I have to acknowledge the Sonic Youth website, where there's an amazing guide to Sonic Youth gear. It's magnificently nerdy. It kind of covers every single guitar that they've used at every stage of their career, and amps, effects, pedals. So if you want more detailed information, then I do recommend you check that out. And I suppose Sonic Youth, one of those bands who you assume are going to be more into effects pedals than they actually are. I think most of their career they're pretty minimal with effects pedals, which I actually quite like. They don't have these huge rigs of exotic boutique effects pedals, and Thurston Moore in particular was quite loyal to just a handful of effects pedals for most of his career. And I'm not sure exactly what they would have used on this recording, but obviously guitar wise they're most associated with Jazzmasters, so I'm today using my American vintage reissued Jazzmaster neck pickup throughout, and that's plugged into a Fender Princeton. And I've got 3 effects pedals down here, and I think with Sonic Youth there are 3 sounds really that you need to have covered. There's a clean sound, which generally you can get just by going straight into an amp. Then a mild overdrive, so here I'm using the J Rocket Archer, which is a clone with a K type pedal. And then you want something a bit more extreme and over the top, so some kind of fuzz. Today I've got a Rat distortion pedal. I think Thurston Moore was a fan of the Turbo Rat. I don't have one of those, I've just got the regular Rat, but it does seem to get those kind of Sonic Youth sounds. And in this particular song I actually had the overdrive, the J-Rocket Archer switched on all of the time, so even for my clean sound, just to add a little bit of grit to what is essentially a clean sound. And then for the solo section I stepped on the Rat as well, and I think the Rat really works well in conjunction with other overdrive pedals. So here I've got it coming after an overdrive. It also works well going into a distorted amp, so if you've got an amp that does that, then try running a Rat in front of that. Sounds then, this is just the Jazz Master going into a clean Princeton. Switching on the J-Rocket Archer overdrive. And then adding the Rat as well. And I almost forgot, I did actually use one further pedal, and if you listen closely to the track, I think in the final verse you can hear that Lee Ranaldo steps on some kind of wobbly modulation pedal. Not sure exactly what he's using, but I'm using a Boss vibrato pedal which sounds like this. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. If you would like to see more Sonic Youth on this channel, let me know your song suggestions. Maybe I'll look at another one before the end of the year. And tab, of course, is going to be up on the Patreon page. Check that out if you're interested, and I'll see you in the next video.